legal choice, but to amend an official document that should lead, inevitably, to the proper eradication of pit latrines in schools. The organisation says that the Constitutional Court has denied her department leave to appeal an earlier ruling, which it says closed 5 loopholes in her ministry's official norms and standards document. The group's also asking for certain documents around school infrastructure to now be made public. Sibabalwe Gcilitshana is the Parliamentary Officer for Equal Education. She's in our Cape Town Parliamentary studios now. Sibabalwe, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Why do you believe these documents must now be released? What information would they actually give us?
Good evening, Stephen, and thank you so much for having me. So these documents are long outstanding, for one. The norms and standards have previously required that the 9 education MECs send these documents, particularly relating to the implementation plans and progress reports around school infrastructure, be sent to the minister, but nothing actually compelled her to make them publicly available. Now, with the judgment that was handed down in the Bishop High Court last year, the judge ordered that the minister actually rewrite the norms and standards to make sure that they now compel her to make them publicly available. And this is one of the ways in which communities, parents, principals, learners, and so many other people around the country are able to keep tabs on when their schools are going to be getting upgrades, where on the list they are, and what the progress generally, not just in the provinces, but actually at a national point of view are. The other outstanding documents also include the NIMS report, which is one of the only ways in which we can get updated statistics around school infrastructure in the country. We are also waiting for the minister to release a proper plan around how to fix toilets and sanitation in general in Limpopo, as required by the Polokwane High Court, specifically looking into putting out interim plans for current pit toilets that are a serious hazard, what's going to be done in the interim, as well as SAFE initiative reports. So we've heard this SAFE initiative, which was launched last year, and that it's actually been doing work in delivering sanitation to different schools, but there is no report or information detailing how the money is disbursed, where can we find it in the budgets, and also more specifically where these schools are that the sanitation has been delivered to.
There have been various orders around fixing toilets at schools in Limpopo in particular. Is there any progress on sorting out these toilets? Is there any movement at all?
Well, at the moment, we have not seen any, and that was one of the reasons why we were calling for this plan. So the plan that the MEC of Limpopo, as well as the minister, had previously submitted to the court was not a plan at all. It was lacking these very important things, such as what are we going to do about current pit latrines that pose a serious threat, which schools in Limpopo are also high risk, So when we were expecting to see a plan, we were expecting to see a detailed report which outlines exactly the state of sanitation in Limpopo. But what we have seen is that that has not been the case. Yes, in some schools there has been a movement just on what the provinces and the national programs and conditional grants that fund education, but specifically, when we're speaking to sanitation, there's been very slow movement, and that's why we need the minister to release these plans, because there will be no implementation if we don't know what the state of sanitation is, and without these plans, we essentially have nothing to hold her and the MEC accountable with.
The Minister Motshekga wants to create an education infrastructure unit. This would basically sort out the infrastructure problems in schools. It would lead to a situation where one body would go out and sort of deal with all of these issues. We would know exactly how big these issues are. You oppose that. What's wrong with setting up a body that would deal with infrastructure problems at schools?
Well, what the minister wants us and the rest of the country to believe is that this education infrastructure unit would be solving the problem. But we currently have the law and the framework that allows us to do this exactly. And her department is specifically responsible for this. What we're seeing here with this unit that is, not even a proper proposal, it's just a statement which was made or mentioned in fleeting, is that it's an attempt by the government and the minister herself to yet again evade responsibility. Where we have seen that she has failed and various departments have failed to come to the party, instead of using the norms as they should be amended prior to the judgment that was handed down to actually compel poor performing departments and entities to do their job. She's essentially saying that you know, her hands are tied, the department can't afford to deliver this, when essentially their responsibility is to do exactly this. So an infrastructure unit that would be developed now would essentially cost more funds to set up. It would indefinitely delay the time through which, you know, school infrastructure, which is much needed and poses a serious threat to learners and teachers who are in that space, would receive it. So actually, what is she suggesting happens in the interim? We pause, we wait, the DBE is no longer capable of delivering school infrastructure, and every other learner in this country must just, you know, hang in there with in inappropriate infrastructure. That is absolutely unacceptable. And essentially what it is just a way to say, well, you know what, someone else needs to be responsible for this because we need to focus on something else. No. School infrastructure falls within the mandate of the Department of Basic Education. And if we had to create a statutory body or a unit that would take over after every time government failed to do their job, we would find ourselves probably without funds because we would be trying to, you know, fix. So it is actually their constitutional mandate to make sure that they cooperate with each other. And these amendments in the norms and standards essentially give her and the 9 education MECs more power to, you know, to work together and solidify this intergovernmental cooperation that is needed to realize school infrastructure.
So, I mean, this is almost it's a classic governance problem, right? You have a large number of schools with dangerous pit latrines. We have probably millions of young children who have to literally risk their lives just to relieve themselves on a daily basis. The pain those parents go through knowing that their children are doing that. You also probably have the goodwill of society to fix this. If you started a pit latrine fund, you'd probably get millions in there within 24 hours. It's in the government, the political interests of government to fix it. Why do you think it hasn't happened?
I think the government up until now has not been wanting to firstly be accountable in the manner that they should be. So no one expects that pit latrines are going to disappear overnight. But what we are expected is that there is a concerted effort to work to achieve this. Now, when the norms and standards were promulgated in 2013, it had set deadlines for service delivery. And with each year that passes, the minister and the department or government at large have continued to miss those deadlines. What that communicates to us is that there's poor planning. And when there's poor planning, we're obviously going to see that in the way that those plans are being implemented, or rather the lack thereof. So whether or not it is in the interest of government should not be the question. What we should be asking is whose interest is really being put at stake for every time that infrastructure is not being realized, and that is learners. If we then take that as the point, are we really, really willing to risk learners' lives, teachers, millions of young people across the country simply because the government can't plan and implement? And I would say absolutely not.
That was Sibabalwe Gcilitshana, a parliamentary officer from Equal Education.